Got it.
Hi, and thank you for joining us. Today I have Lisa Moore. She is a spiritual coach, author, and speaker. She's a visionary leader who has followed her passion for making a difference in the world for almost 2 decades. As a Doctor of Divinity for the past 18 years, Lisa has served as a spiritual counselor, and she holds many certifications in the realm of healing arts. Her compassion, depth of knowledge, and experience in both the physical and non-physical worlds provide the foundation for her profoundly transformational sessions. And I invited Lisa because I met her son, Gordon, who had a story about his transformation from addiction to recovery. And so I was really impressed with him, and I wanted to meet his mom. So welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. And thank you for all the work that you're doing and helping families and parents and mothers, especially dealing with addiction and mental health and mental issues. And, it's we're in an interesting time right now. And I think the more we build circles and communities and are here supporting each other, the better it is for each and every one of us. So thank you again for having me and for sharing your wisdom and your story. And
my pleasure. Yeah, my pleasure. And I didn't know when I met Gordon that you were a Doctor of Divinity and somebody who really helps others heal. And so we're a lot alike because we have a heart for that. So how old was Gordon when you first realized that maybe he had a substance use disorder?
So I have actually been in the healing arts for many years and have raised my kids with holistic practice. And Gordie had been on one antibiotic his entire life with a severe strep throat issue and strictly homeopathy and healing work. And he would be he was my eldest, or he is my eldest, my only son. And Gordie fell in love with the game of golf at about age 8. And we lived on a golf course. So that was truly his second home. He just, morning, noon, and night, he would be over at the golf course and putting and chipping and just connecting with older people and young people. And just that was his true passion. And at 13, he had a scenario where it was definitely an outer body type of experience. And I took him to some healing friends and we got him back, and that was that. And he was 13. Well, at age 18, he ended up getting a golf scholarship at Colorado State. And we had made the choice to leave Atlanta and move to Naples, Florida, actually. And he was all for it. He was he was a senior, and he had a girlfriend who was going off to Auburn. So he was fine with coming to Florida, where he had spent, he'd been we'd lived in the same house since the age of 8. And so we moved to Florida, and I started noticing some behavior changes. Yet he was on the golf team. He wasn't having the success that he was having when he was up in Atlanta. And we just thought, he's got a long distance relationship with his girlfriend, and 18, he's a senior. So a friend of ours from Atlanta called and said, we're happy to let Gordie come and live with our family, and he can finish his senior year up in Woodstock, Georgia, and play on the golf team. So we did. And off he went. We gave him his car. His dad drove him up there, and that was that. And the mom called me and she said, Lisa, I don't know what's going on, but there's huge changes in Gordie's whole demeanor and on and on and on. Well, about 3 weeks later, they called again and they said, we found a bag of marijuana hidden in the back of the toilet bowl container. And we were dumbfounded. And she said, we just can't have him around our 3 younger kids. You got to come get him. So we went up and we got Gordie and realized that he was pretty heavily addicted to marijuana, which was totally shocking because this was a kid that was the top 5% in the state of Georgia academically. His passion was golf. and the marijuana got hold of him, and he made it through high school, and off to college he went. Well, Colorado State, and he called me every single day. We would speak. Well, in November, he came home at Thanksgiving, and I was starting to really, really notice something is off. And I'm an intuitive, so I'm very connected to him. And as moms know, we know. So I was just in this state of, we had moved a second time down in Florida. So, and I'm dealing with 2 teenage daughters also at the same time of this, with a lot of change going on. So Gordie came home at Thanksgiving, and he was really, I noticed something was really not right. And he was on the golf team, but he wasn't taken. The coach made a choice not to take him to this big tournament, which really took Gordie for a big loop. So he flew back. He was home for 4 days at Thanksgiving. He flew back, and he said the next weekend he was going off skiing. Well, I ended up waking up with a dream. And in the dream, I had a vision that his head was buried, and all I could see were his eyes, and he was in complete fear. So I kept on calling his phone. It kept on going to voicemail, voicemail, voicemail. And at that point, I'm panicking. And I got hold of a friend of a friend, and they said, oh, he's in a really bad state and he's addicted to ecstasy. Well, I literally was on the next flight that afternoon, and I showed up in his college room, and he was, needless to say, stunned. He was completely gone. And it was just heartbreaking. So he was adamant that he was going to see a counselor at the college. Found out he had not gone to a single class in basically 2 months, and he was heavily addicted to ecstasy. So we agreed to let him stay. And one of his friends called. I literally flew home that night. And a friend called me at 1 o'clock in the morning and said he's in a psychotic break. And so the next day, his father got on a plane, and we got him out of college. And he was dealing ecstasy, which is considered manslaughter. And we're being Canadian, it was a really, really big deal. So we got him out of the college scene, and we brought him home. And, we were really struggling financially, and he refused to do therapy. He refused to go to a rehab facility. And as you know, as a parent, once they hit the age of 18, your hands are tied and you have absolutely no control. And he ended up running away from home basically, and living on the street for 3 days, and ended up getting arrested. He spent his 20th birthday in jail, which was just heartbreaking for me. I mean, here was this bright shining star, and who chose to go down a really dark path. And he ended up getting almost killed with a brick to the brain. And we have a dear friend of ours that has a brain training facility in Jupiter, Florida, called the Brain Training Center. And I took him over there, and the owner said to me, he said, we typically see brain trauma will expose itself within 3 months to 3 years. And sure enough, it was exactly 3 months later. Gordie had his first true psychotic break, and he had destroyed his bedroom, smashed every trophy. He was lying naked in his closet. And I mean, it was brutal.
I can't even imagine seeing that as a mother, not knowing, like, what is this?
And I ended up calling the police basically, and they came and they took him away. My husband at the time was working in the restaurant world, and he wasn't home. And I called. So there, Gordie was strapped in an ambulance, and he didn't even look like my son. So I called a dear friend who's like a mother to me, and she met me down at the hospital and at the mental ward. And they diagnosed him schizophrenic, bipolar, manic, legally insane. The state of Florida literally ready to lock him up for 6 months. So,
Oh,
yeah,
how long ago was that?
that was actually in 2009,
Oh,
or it was September of 2008. So he was in a lockdown mental ward for 9 days, and they drugged him basically with meds. And I was traveling on a business trip. My husband at the time was great dealing with him, and they moved him out of the mental ward to another facility. And nothing was diet related. I mean, they just give you Coca-Cola and white bread basically. So make a long story short, he entered into another mental ward because he had another psychotic break, and he even escaped out of that mental ward. And I got a phone call at 11 o'clock at night from the police and saying, "Is your son there?" And I'm like, "No, he's in a lockdown facility." And when he would be in a facility, it would almost give me a sense of peace,
sure.
because I knew he was safe. I knew he was, managed mentally, or whatever
Right.
you call it. So it truly gave me a sense of hope. So they call me, and Dave was just coming home from work that night at 11 o'clock. And they said, "Oh no, he's not here. He escaped." So we drive down towards the hospital down in Naples, and the police dogs. And as I'm driving, this sense of rush came through me. And it was a horrible, horrible feeling that, it was almost like it would be easier. And I'm sure a lot of the mothers listening to this would say it would be easier if my child was not alive.
Right.
And I had this rush come over me, and I was like, no. And I admit I'm an angel therapist, so I work very closely with the angelic realm. And I called in Archangel Michael to help me and Gordie with any fear of just keeping my child protected, because I thought, this is it. He's swimming to Mexico, because they said he ran to the beach basically. And I thought, you don't know the mental state, whether he's detoxing or whether he's, who knows. So Dave we searched for him for about 2 hours, and we couldn't find him. I mean, the helicopters were searching the beach, and there was no sight of him. And Dave brought me home. We said, that's it. We just got to wait until the next morning when it's daylight. And they ended up, the police said, "We're giving up also at this point in time," because who knew whether he was hiding in a house or whatever, hiding under a bush. So we ended up at 1:11 in the morning. I got a phone call as Dave and he's driving me home. We're going home. We've given up. And it was this guy that used to work with Dave, and he called Dave's cell phone and said, Gordie is at my house. And we were like, "You've got to be kidding." Well, I work very closely with signs and symbols. And I knew at that moment at 1:11, and I still have goosebumps, that he was going to be safe. And sure enough, Dave took me home, and we had to call the police to come and get him. And they basically tied Gordie to the bed. I never saw him because I just, as a mom, I just couldn't deal with it.
Oh no.
So four mental wards later, and we had taken a chiropractor who said to us, "Have you ever had his neurotransmitters tested?" And I'm like, "What in the world are neurotransmitters?" I mean, I'm like, "What are those?"
Yeah.
And he said, "You can do a test." And at that point, we had very little money and living on credit cards. And I had not shared anything with my close family. My parents didn't know what was going on. And the reason why is I didn't need the energy of their judgment at all. I'm like, you know what? I just need the love and the support for me to be able to have a conversation with somebody who's not going to judge me, and that's just going to be there for me while I go through this. And there was a time when I get it from a spiritual standpoint, where I said to God, source, spirit, why did he choose me this lifetime? Because as parents, our children choose us. And I got a big message that came through that not many mothers could have handled going through what he went through. And as a mom, as you all know, it's very, very challenging. It's brutal. It can destroy marriages. It can destroy health and complete well-being. So I knew that this was his path, and that he chose me as a mother this lifetime. So when this chiropractor, we made the choice, let's scrape together $200 or whatever. And meanwhile, Gordie was in a mental ward because he had had another psychotic break. And when he would regress, he would literally regress to be a 3-year-old. And he was this child, and he wasn't doing drugs. The only drugs he was on was the prescription drugs at that point. So, and it was almost, and his medical records were like an inch high. And my cousin-in-law basically who's a psychotherapist. She had read the file, and she said, he is complete, expect this kid to be gone. He's completely schizophrenic, and he's nuts, basically.
But did they, and maybe this is later in the story, you're going to get there, but as a mom who's been through this and talked to a lot of other moms, his brain could have just been diseased from the use. And to treat him as like a mental, I know you don't know what to do in the psychotic moment, but
well, and I'm a firm believer that the addiction and the mental health is one of the same.
Yeah.
Whether somebody's turning to substance or marijuana because they're depressed or they're got anxiety or stress, whatever.
Right.
It's just the label. That's it. So we ended up doing this urine test to test his neurotransmitter, because no psychiatrist or psychologist,
they won't look at that.
Zero. And I had actually gone to NOMT, the National Association, or NAMI. Once I went to a group meeting with Dave in Naples. And, I've been in the holistic world for so long, and I'm very much, a believer of the effects of diet and health and fitness, and all that is very, very important. So we go to this meeting, and I'm looking around a room of 20 people, and this one woman saying, well, my husband was part of AA, and he, was an alcoholic, and now he drinks 5 Coca-Colas a day, and he just had a psychotic break, and he's in a mental ward now. And I'm looking around the room going, oh, all these people need to be my clients.
Yeah.
Because of what I do. And I said, that wasn't a fit for me. Yeah. As I say to other moms and parents that I work with, is you've got to find, it's not a judgment scenario. Wherever you can find that inner peace for yourself, amen, God bless. That is the greatest gift that you can find for yourself. That is the absolute.
Yes.
And I even see it with people that go to codependence no more, which as moms we tend to enable, and we tend to be codependent because we want to protect our little wounded birds and it's, you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself. Right.
Yeah.
That's the absolute. So back to getting in another mental ward, we went to even a different county to see if there were any changes with getting to the core of what was really going on. Now, you can't forget, this was a brilliant kid that just was never going to drink, rarely drank, and never was going to smoke. And now he's smoking cigarettes, which is, again, part of the mental illness. It's part of the dopamine and the neurotransmitter not functioning properly. So the day he is getting we get the results. I pick up the results from the chiropractor's office as we're driving to pick him up or to see what the mental ward is going to do with him. And he was sitting in front of the judge when I showed up to the psychiatrist to say, oh my God, we've just gotten this report, and his all his serotonin, his dopamine, all his brain function were completely messed up. So the psychiatrist turned to me and she said, what do you want us to do with them? And I said, and we at that point were saying, we're done with this. We can't, our family is being destroyed with this, the amount of stress.
Right.
He's refusing to go to rehab. What are we supposed to do? And he was not using at that point at all. And everybody, we had spoken to other parents that had gone through this stuff, and they were saying, don't spend the money on rehab until he's truly ready.
Yeah.
Just do it. So I said to the psychiatrist, you know what, now that I know I have these results, let him come back home. And she said, I can present that to the judge, but I can't guarantee it. So she comes back into the room about 20 minutes later. We're waiting in the lobby at the mental ward. And she said, I've never seen this, but the judge has awarded him back to you. Because at this point, he's 20 years old. This is his 4th episode in a mental ward in a course of 3 months, since September to January.
Wow.
So we got him home. They had him, I had full control of giving him his medications. And I had decided to take him off of dairy and wheat to do a clean. And I was a stay-at-home mom. And I honestly, as I tell parents, I don't even think I could have functioned working a job at Starbucks because of the amount of stress that I was under.
Sure.
The emotional stress, the financial stress, the managing. Our middle daughter had just gone off to college in California. My youngest was a senior. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so we brought him home, and they had him so medicated that he could barely function from walking from the kitchen to the sofa because they had him so drugged up. And we ended up, he finally said, Mom, I'm ready for rehab. So I spent probably 10 days searching and researching. And meanwhile, we had no money. At that point, we finally mentioned to my parents that what was going on in my life. And, this was the eldest grandchild. And so they were heartbroken, yet, the vibration of these kids coming in that are much more prone to addiction, whether it's gaming, whether it's drugs, whether it's one of the same, basically. So I found believe it or not, it was a Narcanon facility. And somebody had said, well, that's Scientology. And at that point, I didn't know. And I said, I don't care. If this is where his soul needs to go, because financially we could afford it, then amen, God bless. So that morning we were flying from Naples out to Palm Springs. And I said to Gordie, don't worry, this place is not diet related. I am going to, you can eat whatever you want, because it had been 2 weeks where he had not had any dairy and wheat. So, and he was really quite clear. So I ended up, he had a donut and he had a sandwich and bread and gluten and on and on and on. And we drove from LAX into Palm Springs, and I could start seeing the triggers by 7 o'clock that night when we dropped him off.
Oh, no.
And the owner, the manager of the rehab facility said, don't worry, we don't call him. My husband at the time was flying back on that Monday night. That was a Saturday. He was taking the red eye back to Florida. And sure enough, they called Monday morning and said, we can't handle him. He is gone nuts. So they said, we're going to put him on a plane to go to San Francisco to a place called Alternative to Med Center. And I said, put him on a plane. Are you kidding me? Because I knew when he would snap, he would literally go to a 3-year-old. So they ended up sending somebody. They got him up to San Francisco and got him into this place. And he literally lasted there 10 hours before they had to get him into another facility to get him stable back on the net. And I ended up staying in Los Angeles at my daughter's, who was going to school there. And I just had to relinquish the control of knowing that he was in the hands of this other facility. And as you never know what facility is going to work or what program is going to work or what's not going to work. I mean, you just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was in the hospital there for about another week, and the facility brought him back into their program, which they were there for he was there for 3 months. It took 2 months to wean him off of the medication. And then a month he did 5 hours a day detoxing in a sauna with high dosages of supplements and niacin and on and on and on. But in the meantime, they did a food allergy testing, and he was extremely high in eggs.
Yeah.
And dairy and wheat. So they did a strict, all organic, no, healthy food. And he came home right after, it was May of 2009, he came home. And 10 days later, we were moving as a family to Sedona, Arizona.
Oh,
and
gosh.
my husband of 23 years said, I don't love you any longer, and I don't want to be married.
Oh.
And Gordie chose to come with Mom. So it is still very emotional, even though it's 13 years ago. And when I stayed in LA, when Gordie was in the program in San Francisco, I only saw him once in 3 months. And I was actually working on a TV show for a program for 18 to 30-year-olds for prevention of mental illness and addiction. And I was working with Randy Spelling, Aaron Spelling's son. And so I stayed in LA to work on that, which the timing wasn't right. And when I got home, as an intuitive, I knew my husband was having an affair with somebody that he met while I was gone. And which they say, dealing with mental health or addiction, it's 80% of families don't make it.
No.
Parents just, it was challenging. It was hard, but it was, God bless.
Wow.
So Gordie decided he was going to come with me, which we drove across the country. And my youngest was leaving to go off to college at Embry-Riddle. And
where's that?
It's in Prescott, Arizona.
Okay.
There's 2 campuses, one in Florida and one in Prescott. And Gordie, he, again, it was more added stress on me, wondering whether is he going to have another psychotic break? Is he going to stay clean and sober? I mean, who knew? I mean, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So the owner of Alternative to Meds, Lyle Murphy, came to visit. Lyle had a place in his heart for Gordie.
Oh.
And he came to visit us in Sedona, and he fell in love with Sedona. I said, you need to move your facility here instead of being in downtown San Francisco. He said, find us a place. So I actually did.
Oh.
Alternative to Med Center has just gotten accredited it's taken 3 years. So they've been in Sedona for 12 years now.
Congratulations.
And Gordie has, the first 3 months, and Lyle said, it's okay that he's just doing nothing. He loafed around. I kept him on a strict diet. He was living with me and not knowing anyone. So literally it was 3 months later, he joined Toastmasters. He started volunteering with a horse equine, and he got a job out at the resort here in Sedona. And thanks be to the miracles, he has never looked back. And he
shared in the interview with Carrie Overrunner how and maybe it was during that time where he just didn't know what to do. He joined Toastmasters, but maybe before then, I don't know the timing. He asked you to get him the book, Think and Grow Rich. Do you remember that?
Yeah, well, I've got, spiritual books. They've been in my house for, many years. Yeah. So and that was another interesting point. Gordie, out of my 3 kids, he was my child that did not enjoy reading whatsoever. He struggled with reading. He was a math kid, and yet he was the top 5% academically in the state of Georgia. So, and when I think it was part of the recovery, maybe when he was in the rehab, that he started to read, and he just became this avid reader. And he was just drawn to the personal growth and the personal development realm, which is, he and I are very, very close in the way,
spiritually too. Yeah.
In a spiritual sense. And one of my gifts is I'm a natural spiritual connector. That's what I do with connecting people to deceased loved ones, to connected to their spirit guides, to God, call it whatever, God, source.
Is it a shaman? Am I saying that right?
A shaman. Yeah, shamans do similar work. I don't consider, I'm more of a, everybody is intuitive. It's learning how to access the intuition. And then once you've accessed it, it's learning how to implement your intuition into your day-to-day life, and so that's what I teach. That's what I really, which comes back down to empowering and inspiring people. And yet I understand there's many, many different components. My partner and I got very sick, and we almost died about 2 years ago. And come to find out, the house that we've been living in and we were always intending on purchasing was riddled in black mold. And
I've heard of that happening.
And we thought we had early Alzheimer's. So here you go back into the component of the mental illness, where it was a physical symptom that was going on, and it was called black mold, and it truly is deadly. So
did you ever, like, going back to Gordie and all his time in and out of, do you feel like it was that brick to his head and the drugs that kind of, I don't know if you call it diseased his brain, but impaired his brain to the point where it had to heal, but then they kept giving him, not knowing what to give him, they were giving him all these drugs that were just making it worse? I mean, how do you make sense of it?
Well, ecstasy dries up the spinal column fluid.
Oh, okay. I didn't know.
So that definitely would have played on part of the neurotransmitters and the functioning of the brain. But I do firmly believe that the trauma to the brain was really impacting. And just like Mike, the owner of the brain training facility, said, they so often see a psychotic break happen 3 months to 3 years after the trauma has taken place. It's just, and when you're taking marijuana or drugs, then it really amps it up big time. And, the whole, these kids that think that the classic indigo children, when I don't know if anybody has read about the indigo children, that, they think they're invincible. They think that they can have one puff of marijuana and that's it. Well, one of the things that I realized after going down that deep rabbit hole with him is marijuana can trigger the schizophrenic gene.
Wow.
Yeah, if you Google marijuana and schizophrenic, you can see it. Now, I was never a marijuana smoker. Do I enjoy having a glass of wine or a tequila? Yes, absolutely. Do I drink every day? But marijuana can trigger a schizophrenic gene. So that's also what I thought was going on.
I have a mom in my group, and she, oh gosh, my heart just breaks for her. This daughter of hers was this certain way, and now she's smoking dope all the time, and now she's like an entirely different person. And I'm not a physician, but my mom used to be a psychiatric nurse, and she used to talk to us about schizophrenia and how awful it was, because it's always these brilliant minds like your son and probably like this lady's daughter, and they're great, and then all of a sudden it's like at a certain mid-20s, 25, 30, somewhere in there. It's like this flip, or the switch gets flipped. And I'm like, I want her to go see, the doctor, but she can't even stop doing marijuana. She can't even function because she's afraid she won't be able to smoke her weed. So she just doesn't even have a life and doesn't know how to get out of it. So I just find that very interesting.
Well, and to sort of go down another rabbit hole.
Okay, let's.
Well, to finish off with the Gordie scenario, I think what also could have triggered when he had, at age 13, he had that first sort of blip of behavior, mental stuff. And it wasn't drug related, but, and this has sort of come up with an aha for me in the last year. I just lost you on the screen. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Huh.
That's weird.
That's interesting. No, oh well, I can't see you, but you can see me.
Oh.
Is what I think this whole trigger was, where did he spend all those years from age 8, was in and around the chemicals of a golf course.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
That's what I think really triggered some of the stuff that his body just got to a complete overload of toxicity with, and these kids, they would pick up a ball and they'd lick it and they'd lick their finger.
Oh yeah. I just don't even realize it.
And I think that was also part of the scenario. And the other, that talking to other parents, one of the first questions, especially with girls, I'll ask them, they'll say, my daughter's now addicted to marijuana. Well, if anybody has had their daughter have at age 12 to 14, the PVC, the vaccine.
HPV, or the HPV, okay.
The HPV, which has heroin in it and rat poison, and it can create the addiction behavior where these kids are really prone. I see that a fair amount with especially girls, where there is no addiction in the family anywhere.
Yeah.
And
that triggers something.
It triggers something.
Wow.
So, and again, it's not a judgment, it's just an awareness. And we as moms, you have to find your sense of peace and really looking at behavior of the enabler or the codependence. And if it means finding a group for support that you can,
if it works for you,
that works for you, then that's the bottom line here.
Right.
Because we, again, it's looking at being addicted to the story. And even though this is emotional for me, I don't, it's been 12, 14 years. Do I say that my son is an addict? No, I don't. It doesn't even come into my field. And a lot of these kids are not into going to AA.
No,
because it's like, that's the indigos. They're the system busters. Those programs don't typically work for that age group. Right. Now, is AA an amazing program for a lot of people? It's saved millions of people's lives.
But it's not. Again, everybody has their own recovery journey, and it's not the same for everyone.
Exactly. And it's true. It's right. And it's transferring one addiction to another. Hey, if it means, and again, one of the worst things for an addict is giving them coffee and sugar. Well, what do you find in an AA room? First thing you walk past is the coffee. That is the worst. Cleaning up, the mental, the physical, the emotional. And, are there different things out there that can really, really help? Absolutely. We're coming into magnificent time on the planet that people are awakening. People are realizing the traditional way does no longer serve them, whether it's, and I'm not one that says, oh, you got to cut if you're put on Xanax or for anxiety. I'm not the type to say, go cold turkey. No, there's a process, because you can, and that's what happened with Gordie. He would go, they were injecting him with the drugs, because he was, here was a kid raised in a holistic. He'd been on one antibiotic his entire life.
Yeah.
So he was not for all the meds they were giving him.
Oh, gee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. There's so much to it. So what advice could you give a mom listening to this right now? What helped you? I mean, obviously you're a coper, but you lost a lot along the way. But
I did. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
But what, looking back, what was it that helped you to get to where you are right now, cope through it all?
I think the number one is finding your pod, finding your community, finding the people that are going to love you and nurture you while you go through your own process. And whether that's finding a meditation group, whether it's finding a prayer group, whether it's finding your church, whether it's finding something where you can feel that love and the support.
Yeah.
That is number one. You've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself. And what happened with me is I going through the divorce, and I ended up actually coming out. I had never been with a woman, so that was another huge.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
That I didn't know would have an effect on Gordie. And I ended up getting in a relationship. I moved to California, and the relationship didn't work. And when I moved back to Sedona, I said to myself, I need to be alone. I've never lived alone my entire life. Yeah. And I spent a year where I went even deeper down the rabbit hole, and I did deeper work on myself on all levels, emotionally and psychologically. And, and here I am a coach, and I'm being, in the healing arts. At that point, I'd already been in it for 15, 18 years sort of thing. So
but you found but I love how you allowed yourself to be alone to then, it's kind of like to regroup and find your peace and what was going to work for you in life. And you healed yourself. Sometimes we think of ourselves last, and we want to help others heal, but we don't always know how to heal ourselves. But I think you knew, you just had to spend time doing it. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. I knew I needed to really be in my own space without any distraction of anyone or anything, because my natural innate ability, I was a stay-at-home mom for 23 years. It's the nest. Let me help and heal everybody else and not look at the mirror at myself. And meanwhile, my family had disowned me. My father had passed away. My mother disowned me. I still have no relationship with my mom, and it's been 12, 13 years. And yes, I get it. This is her path. This is her choice. So there are parents that do disown their kids because of addiction. And if that's what works for you, then you just have to have a clear conscience about that. And my mom made the choice, whether it's because I'm now in an amazing relationship with my partner of almost 10 years, I don't know. This is her path. This is her journey, as painful as it is. And I get it. I mean, it's just, and again, like I said, I chose her as my mother. Yeah. So, it is what it is. Yeah. But what ended up transpiring after being alone, and I said, I'm not dating, I'm not doing anything, zero. I'm going to focus. I'd started a nonprofit within the LGBT community around wellness and addiction. I had since met Leslie, and I said, no, I'm not dating. we were friends. Well, we ended up becoming partners, in which I'm just incredibly, we have an amazing relationship. My kids adore her. She's very close with Gordie. But what happened after I felt so willing to receive the love and the compassion and to be heard on all levels, my body went into an unwinding, and I ended up getting a lot of physical issues going on. And I knew it was the buildup of the amount of stress that I had gone through with my son and the divorce and on and on and on. And I'm a type A personality. I'm a, it's just, that's what happened. And my physical came in and crashed down, and touch wood. I mean, I couldn't walk. I couldn't exercise. I couldn't, yet I knew, and I was doing a lot of emotional work around it and forgiveness. And it took about a year for me to finally regain my health and well-being back, because of the amount of stress that I had gone through. So as a mom, again, I can't stress enough, find the things that bring you passion, find the things that bring you joy.
Right.
Whether it's going to an art class, whether it's learning a new skill set, whether it's volunteering, it doesn't matter what it is.
Right.
Find something that can bring you into that higher vibrational state of love, passion,
joy. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Amen.
And out of that comes a sense of hope within your own energy of the true essence of love.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
That's the key.
Yeah. And I bet you're so proud of Gordie right now.
I am. And he's
great.
And it's been really interesting watching him on the journey. He last spring, it's almost a year ago, he called, and he's been living all over the world.
Oh, he travels all over. Yeah.
All over the world. And he called, and he was so sweet. And he's like, Mom, I really need some mom time. So he came and he stayed with Leslie and I for 2 weeks, and which was fantastic. We played lots of cards. I got to nurture him and be that mother bear.
Yeah.
Cry. The cooking.
Does he still golf?
No, not much. Well, he's living abroad. His golf clubs are in his storage unit. But he called about 2 months ago, and he's really launched himself within the crypto world, which was sort of prompted by me mentioning a couple of years ago. And he had no interest in it. And his dad was a currency trader, so he reached out to his dad and said, I need you to go down and really research and help me launch myself. And sure enough, Dave has been basically helping Gordie for over a month now, and has been staying with him in Florida. And so it's been a magical journey watching him reconnect with his dad on a
fantastic.
On a very sweet level. And so supposedly he's going to be in, I haven't spoken to him in about a month because he's been so busy with his new business. And he's going to be in Scottsdale, I think next week or this weekend. So I may make a quick journey down there to give him a hug and tell him how much I love him and how proud I am. And yet knowing this is his journey, he's in God's hand or Spirit's hands. And you just have to stay positive and know that, this is his journey.
Right. Yeah. And how old is he now? Is he 35? Wait, I don't know.
He's 33. He'll be 34 in June. And he's a Gemini. So anybody who's into the astrology and as understanding the different personalities that can, the Jekyll and Hyde of a Gemini, and yet he's a manifester in numerology. So he's, there's a lot to learn. And that's what I tell parents, understand first about yourself and really tap into resources. There's a lot that's coming up and out into, nothing has changed. I mean, I have books of my grandmother's from the 1920s. Your word is your wand. So, this is again, a big part of what I teach is how to, our words are powerful. And if you keep on projecting negativity about your child or
yourself, anything,
that's not helping. No. We're all energy. So the more you can see that light and not getting over the blame of oneself or the judgment, and there's some great prayers that you can do with forgiveness, because a lot of it is, I beat myself up is maybe if we hadn't moved to Naples, Florida,
Oh,
Gordie
yeah.
would never have gotten down this
I
path.
see it,
Yeah.
hear it all the time.
You
Yeah.
hear it all
Or
the time.
if I hadn't divorced his father, or if I hadn't married his father, or if I hadn't done this or that, and we blame ourselves, the guilt, the blame, the shame.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, the guilt and the shame and the this and the that. Yet it comes back to, I realized, after Gordie had done the Toastmasters, he moved down to Phoenix and he got involved with a nonprofit called Not My Kid. He spoke to over 20,000
Oh,
kids from middle school to high school. I mean, that was profound, knowing he touched all those kids' hearts and
yeah.
souls by
And
sharing.
you never gave up. I call myself the chief hope builder. That's my goal, is to just
That's beautiful.
help
Yeah.
moms, find hope, whatever that was, and find a hope hero. And Nightbird, I don't know if you read about Nightbird. She
Now,
was a Golden Buzzer Award on America's Got Talent, and she came out and she auditioned, and she said, "Well, I'd like to sing one of my own songs, my originals." And
yes, I saw that. It was fantastic.
and so, she said, "Well, the doctors only gave me 2% chance to live, but 2% isn't zero. So I have hope." And she died 3 days ago. So,
Oh,
but yeah, but
good.
I tell moms, find a hope hero, find somebody that, you can look at and be just inspired by their hope. And
Right.
anyway, but this was so great. Well, maybe I'll have to have you come back if you're interested
Absolutely.
in a support group where you're actually giving moms tips on something, I don't know, that can help bring hope to their lives, or ways to find joy, something.
Yeah, that's it. That's what it all comes back down to, is
Yeah.
finding the joy and not pointing the fingers at everyone else. It's pointing the fingers back at ourselves.
Become a victor and not a victim. Yes.
You got that right.
Yes. Well, Lisa, this was such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
for
Michelle.
spending
Great
time.
honor, and reach out at any point and any time.
All right. God bless.